Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a really special review for you from the brand Hamilton. A little bit about them. They were originally founded back in 1892, all the way in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in the US of A. And they are currently Swiss made, being, falling underneath the Swatch Group's middle range, kind of a sister brand to the likes of Tissot, Certina, and Mito. And they're really most known for their iconic models featured in both classic and modern cinema. Now, in terms of the type of watch, I'd consider this a classic field watch. Some key common characteristics and design language you're looking for something within that space. It's typically going to have more of a modest vintage style size. Full numerals, whether it be a 12 and a 24-hour scale or possibly a 12-hour and 60-minute scale, and then either on a black or cream dial. This is the new for 2022 Khaki Field Murph 38. And it is, one of science fiction's most famous watches, known by its fans as the Murph. It's now housed in a compact 38 millimeter stainless steel case. It was 42 millimeters in the film and original public release. It was basically a custom mod made specifically for the movie Interstellar. And its kind of commemorative Morse code seconds hand has been omitted from the 38 millimeter variant, which does make it a bit more true to the film's aesthetic, just at a smaller scale. I actually purchased this directly from Hamilton at full list price of $8.95, pretty much the day or second day after its release, once I kind of figured out more about the case. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, as you guys can see, it is on an aftermarket strap from Strap Mill Canada. This is actually one of their very nice premium full shell cordovan leather straps. And it's awesome. So I immediately swapped it out. It does come on a nice strap from Hamilton, a little bit stiff, and the style is a little bit dated and very specific, but also very correct to the movie watch's aesthetic. For me, I think what people like about this watch is that although it was in a film, it's actually super versatile, and it's something that you could absolutely wear every day, even regardless of if you were a fan of, Christopher Nolan's masterpiece or not. Now, getting into some of the details here, 38 millimeter diameter, 12.2 millimeters thick, and then 44.4 millimeters lug to lug in a full stainless steel case that has been brushed with some polished accents, whether they be on the crown or on that fixed bezel. The sapphire crystal is double domed, so that means it's domed on the outer portion and on the underside, which means there's going to be very little to no distortion when you have it at very extreme angles there. And another bonus here is that it does have an inner AR coating, according to Hamilton. I will say that with that domed sapphire, it's definitely very reflection prone, but it's definitely navigating that. I mean, it also has a matte dial, a matte black dial, so it's really going to show reflections. So that's already kind of working against it. And without it having a very heavy AR coating, like typically where you might see some blue or purple hues in there, you can see it still renders pretty clear. So it's more of a clear anti-reflective coating there. And it probably isn't the most powerful or most effective, but it is definitely appreciated and is one of the details that made me really kind of say, okay, I gotta pull the trigger on this one. It's doing the things that we've asked for. Now, the crown is push-pull, and it actually has no ghost position. So if I was to pull this out right now, typically a lot of times you would have an extra position. Here you can see it just stopped. So very nice. So no ghost position. So very cool that, you know, in a watch under $1,000 from a mainstream brand, that they just had that nice little detail. In terms of the movement, this is the automatic ETA caliber H10, and this thing works. It does its job. It is beating at 3 hertz or 21,600 vibrations per hour. It has an 80-hour power reserve, you know, with that little turn down in the beat rate. And then it does also have a Nivacron balance spring, which is going to be less magnetic than your traditional balance spring, but not quite as anti-magnetic as something like a silicone mainspring. So very, very nice. You know, it does its job. I will say, for those of you that don't know, though, as you can see, versus your traditional ETA 2824 or you know, a Sellita SW200 variant or one of the many ETA clones that are out there, it doesn't have you know, a way to adjust it the same way that you would be able to adjust on a traditional ETA movement. So with these newer kind of more Powermatic 80 style movements, you know, this is something where you would actually have to send it in to get worked on, versus just taking it to your local watchmaker. I mean, certain things, right? But in terms of adjustments, I've adjusted standard ETA 2824s as well as Seiko 6R movements, you know, with using the little screwdriver, and it's fine. I don't have that option here, but I will say that typically out of the box, these movements that do come from the Swatch Group typically are running better. They're on the better side in terms of tolerances because they are newer movements, right? So they're using that technology, they're using the lessons learned, and they're putting it into something new that is going to have a bit of a tighter tolerance. Now, it is nice to have that display case back, so you can see that, you know, very just kind of industrially finished. There's not going to be any decoration or anything like that. Really, the most is going to be some vertical brushing there on that nice skeletonized rotor, but that is about it. Now, getting back to the front side here, you can see really beautiful printed indices and indexing. You're getting these cathedral style hands that have been matte blasted, and that is a really cool feature because they catches light in a slightly different way. These can almost render as being white or gray at times, but it's really just a matte finish, which I think is really cool on you know, right over the steel. You're also getting beige, vintage style, old radium superluminova. And I think in terms of the particular hue, I dig it. Like, it's not overly creamy or dark tinted. It definitely has a more natural kind of ivory tone to it. So I really can appreciate that. And I think it does help it, you know, be a bit more versatile in terms of changing things up, even matching with this great strap here, you know, with the ivory stitch style. It really just ties in and kind of brings everything together. The OEM strap also is 20 millimeters, of course, because this has 20 millimeter lug width. And then it's basically calf leather with an alligator texture. And then it has a similar taper that you're going to see here, tapering from roughly 20 millimeters down to 18 at the signed pin buckle. So if you are interested in seeing, you know, the OEM style, definitely check out my unboxing review. Basically, it's just like a live unboxing that I did. Check out the replay if you want to see those pieces in closer detail. But I didn't want to show it kind of in a more realistic setting because all the press footage, everything just has it on that crocodile, you know, printed strap. So why not show it in something that I think it really, you know, that takes it to another level. So I like that. But with all that said, let's actually get this piece on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears extremely well. Of course, if I was to get my wrist closer to the camera, you get some lens distortion there. It's going to look a little bit larger and less centered on the wrist and look like it's really stretching. But as you can see, when I keep my hand down here, you definitely get a better idea in terms of a truer aspect ratio But what I like to do is just go ahead and tighten up this frame so you guys can get a detailed look while actually getting a true idea of how this wears and how it sits nicely centered on the wrist. Check that out. Look at the way that lays. Look at these nicely turned down lugs. Great contouring. I mean, nothing luxury level in terms of the finishing, as you guys can see, but it's just a simple watch. And you start thinking about this genre and this space, right? Like just iconic field watches that have that versatile look. This is something that you can pick up for under $1,000. I mean, even the full retail is $895. And then you start thinking about other iconic field watches, whether they be a Rolex Explorer or something else, even more, kind of high end or, within that spectrum of vintage, very collectible watches, or even against other watches within the Hamilton Khaki field line, or even, something like the Seiko Alpinist, right? If you want to take a field watch with cathedral hands that also has a lot of versatility in terms of being able to be dressed up, but still having a nice rugged kind of nature to it. This, this definitely has some competition out there, but look at how thin this sits and how nicely it's done. It's just a really well done piece, and I absolutely can appreciate that. So with that said, let's go ahead and zoom this back out, get it off the wrist, and set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, really nice surprise in terms of this pretty potent loom, especially considering that field watches aren't really known for having great loom, and really neither is Hamilton. So that is just another cool kind of feature here. But you know what? I always do like to work in a low light transition because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field, enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you could be, coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree, maybe even spending time in your favorite automobile. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, to even include some harsh lighting like you're going to see here, which typically might expose any type of, factory defects. But you can see it really looks really quite fantastic. And I'd say the light play even does bring out some of those warmer golden tones that actually I think make the dial look even better, like almost like a kind of a gilt, visual gilt layout, even though that it's just some ivory tone and some really well chosen print color that just matches beautifully. I really dig this watch, guys. It's handsome. There's not a lot to it. It's just a three-hander, no date, but there's something about it that it caught my eye from back, when I was watching the movie, right? When Matthew McConaughey's character gave it to his daughter. It's just a cool watch. So in terms of closing thoughts, very classic proportions, which make it really versatile in terms of fitting any type of situation. And then you take those classic stylings and you pair them with classic proportions, and it also makes it feel quite dressy at the same time, which is great. But it's in a versatile way, right? Where you can dress it up, or you can also kind of dress things down and really celebrate kind of the toolish kind of field watch nature that's there as well. In terms of model variants, this is also still available in that original 42mm sizing. The main difference is going to be the size, of course, and then that seconds hand, which make it more of a commemorative piece, right? You think about, let's say, the Bond watch, and there's always a bit of a gimmick that's going to be there. I'd say that's what the 42 really nails is, okay, it's the movie watch. And, I'm sure the movie watch itself was probably a little bit larger, one, because it was, it did have some screen time, so they did want it to be larger. Also, the modern Khaki aviation watch that Matthew McConaughey wore was a 42 as well. So I think there was also some symmetry that they wanted to where the watches looked like they were similar sizes. Just one had kind of an old school aesthetic versus the new school. And then you also got to think about the fact that they did have to, use practical special effects to actually set that up to where they could make that seconds hand jump around and do Morse code. So there's a lot of layers there, and I have no ill will towards anybody that paid for the larger unit or anything like that, or that prefer the larger unit over this one. But I think the nice thing is there's enough differentiation to where you could maybe have both, or if you've been waiting, which I've read a lot of comments when the 42 came out, if they ever made it smaller, well, here you go, guys. Here's your opportunity to let Hamilton know that them listening to the fans is actually something that will be good for them from a business perspective. In terms of comparable models, I think Seiko's Prospect Baby Alpinist, and of course the more standard Hamilton Khaki Field Watch variants with similar specs at lower costs, would be probably the Murph's biggest competition. But I think at the same time also that this is just something that's very different in terms of it being more dressy to a certain extent and a little bit more vintage in terms of that aesthetic, where of course the classic field watches, the Khaki Fields are great and very timeless. They definitely don't necessarily have the same vintage charm that you would get from something like this, just due to the handset. And yeah, this thing has great specs too. It has a shorter lug to lug. It has 100 meters of water resistance, which it doesn't need, but it's so nice to have. So that's really great. So for me, guys, bottom line, this is really a modern icon in terms of cinema-themed timepieces. The Murph really played a vital role in the film Interstellar and was more than just a piece of set dressing, right? Like it was an actual, piece of the plot, and it helped advance the story. And there was also a level of sentiment that was there, of course, between, the main character and their daughter. So, for us watch geeks, it really soaked up that screen time and ignited our inner kind of child, gears turning on which reference it might be based on, and if we could snag one when we first saw it on screen. I went through all of those emotions. So after all of the fanfare of the 42 millimeter, more screen accurate size died down, it's definitely nice to see a resurgence around this model and this aesthetic and this film, with this 38 millimeter option, again, kind of just reigniting and re-kicking off a lot of buzz around such a fun and desirable timepiece. Like, they really nailed it in terms of them designing this piece, and it didn't take a lot of work because this dial style and the handset style were pretty easy for them to find in other existing models, and then just kind of porting everything over and removing like one line of text. So this thing looks cool. I dig it a lot, and for me it was totally worth it. And definitely maybe do some future comparisons to a Baby Alpinist, just because I think they are quite comparable in terms of their aesthetic as well as their general kind of purpose and what they're great for. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.